Hey everyone! Welcome back to Homebird Feeder. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Mark, and we've got a really fun episode today because, well, Jess, should I tell them what happened this morning?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Tell them about your little visitor.
Okay, so I'm standing there in my kitchen, right? Making coffee, totally not paying attention. And this tiny hummingbird, I think it was a ruby-throated, but I'm not completely sure, just hovers right outside my window, like staring at me through the glass. And I swear it was giving me this look like, hey, buddy, the feeder's empty.
They really do train us, don't they? Like tiny drill sergeants with wings.
They absolutely do. And speaking of that, we've been getting so many questions about hummingbird feeding lately. Especially since, what was it, last week when you mentioned your new setup?
Oh, right. Yeah. I finally figured out why they weren't coming to my original spot. Turns out I had it all wrong, and you know what? Maybe we should actually talk about this today. Like, how to really set up a hummingbird feeding station that works.
Yes, because it's not just about hanging up a feeder and hoping for the best, right? I learned that the hard way.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
Well, remember last summer when I kept complaining that I wasn't getting any visitors? Turns out I had my feeder basically hidden behind my massive hydrangea bush. Like, how are they supposed to even see it?
Well, at least you figured it out. And honestly, that brings up a really good point about location. I've found that they really need, like, a clear flight path to feel comfortable visiting.
Exactly. And speaking of comfort, can we talk about height for a second? Because I feel like this is something people get wrong a lot.
Oh, yeah? What's your take on ideal height?
Well, from what I've found, somewhere around thinking I want to say about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. But Jess, you do yours differently, don't you?
Yeah, actually, I've been experimenting with different heights, and I found that mine do really well at about chest height, so maybe 4.5 feet. But here's the thing I think is super important, making sure they're far enough away from trees.
Really? How far do you keep them from trees?
Probably about 3 feet, maybe a little more. The important thing is giving them enough space to maneuver. Oh, and speaking of space, can we talk about multiple feeders? Because I feel like this is something people don't think about until they actually need it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Remember when I tried to put 3 feeders right next to each other?
The Great Hummingbird War last year?
It was chaos. I had these tiny angry birds just zooming everywhere. Now I know better. You've got to space them out.
Yeah, like, what would you say? Maybe 6 to 10 feet apart?
That seems about right. Though I found that sometimes you need even more space, especially if you get those really territorial ones. You know what really helped me? Adding those companion plants nearby.
Oh, right. Like the flowers they naturally go for?
Yes. Like I put in some red salvia and bee balm near my feeders, and it's like they feel more at home or something. Plus, it gives them a place to perch between feeds.
Hold on. Speaking of perches, can we talk about feeder types for a second? Because I feel like this is huge and we get so many questions about it.
What's your go-to feeder these days?
Well, I actually switched to those ones with the built-in perches. Game changer. But Mark, you're still using the hanging ones, right?
Hey, they work. Though I did add those little clip-on perches you recommended. But you know what's funny? I noticed they actually seem to prefer the older feeder without the fancy perches sometimes.
Really? That's interesting. Oh, that reminds me. Someone asked us about cleaning routines last week. Should we talk about that? Because I feel like this is super important, especially now that it's getting warmer.
Yes, and I actually learned something new about this. You know how we always said every 3 days? Well,
Oh, wow. We should probably start wrapping up. But Mark, what would you say is like the number one tip for someone just starting out with hummingbirds?
hmm. Huh. Besides not hiding your feeder behind a hydrangea,
Besides that,
honestly, I'd say patience and consistency. Sorry, that's two things. But really, it takes time for them to find your feeder and trust it as a reliable food source.
yeah, that's really good advice. And I'd add, Don't be afraid to experiment with different locations. Just maybe do it gradually, unlike someone we know who moved their feeder 5 times in one day.
That was one time. And in my defense,
Haha. And on that note, we should probably end this episode. Thanks everyone for listening to Homebird Feeder. If you've got questions about your backyard birds,
or stories about your own hummingbird adventures,
drop us a message. We love hearing from you all. See you next week.
bye everyone.